So how was the cruise? Where'd you hit?
It was great. So we hit so we took Celebrity. This is our second cruise on Celebrity, and we hit Celebrity and Royal Caribbean have their own little private island in the Bahamas called Coco Cay, and so we hit that the day after we left Miami. We spent most of the day there. We had a cabana and an attendant, and we so that was nice. And then we hit Cozumel, Mexico, Georgetown, Grand Cayman, and Falmouth, Jamaica, and it was all great. We went, myself and the younger two. We went scuba diving in Cozumel. We had a lot of family came with us, so everybody kind of broke off and did their own excursions and everything. And so the rest of the crew went to see the Mayan ruins, and then we did kayaking in Grand Cayman, which was fun. And then at Falmouth, we just went to the beach and laid on the beach for the day. So
that's badass, man. Cruises are the way to go, dude. We've only gone on two, and it's, dude, that is like, especially when you're taking the family, it is the way to go. It is fire and forget.
It's I get, you always hear the horror stories of cruises, and then apparently there's some special on Netflix right now called like the Poop Cruise, where that cruise ship lost power in the Gulf of America, and like all the sewage started backing up and stuff, which, you hear those, you hear the horror stories. This is our third cruise. Our first one, when the kids were little, we did Carnival. That was a good starter cruise. And, every cruise line kind of has its own personality. And Carnival is a great cruise if you are in your late 20s, early 30s, have small kids, and you want to party. And, it's basically Panama City spring break, on that ship. And that's not our crowd anymore. And so like I said, we did Alaska cruise and with Celebrity, and we just did this one last week with Celebrity, and it was great. Like you said, it takes everything out of it. Like, I get up, I don't have to worry, about driving somewhere. We don't have to worry about, okay, we got to plan, meals today. We got to pack a cooler for the beach. Like, you don't have to do any of that. It's all taken out of the equation. You just have to figure up and be like, man, what am I going to relax and do today? And it's great.
If somebody would have asked me, and I'm all seriousness, if somebody would have asked me this morning, how many cruises has Josh been on in the past 7 years, 5 years since you've been doing the podcast? How many cruises has Josh been on? And I'm not saying this disparagingly. I don't know why I think this. I would have said at least 5. I don't know if that's because you'll talk about the cruise because y'all plan it out way in advance. So and then we'll say, oh well, hey, in June maybe we should. No, I'm going on a cruise. So you may mention it 6 or 7 times a year just in passing. So, but in my mind, it sticks over the 5 years or so. I always said, oh yeah, Josh and his wife, they go on cruises all the time. But you've only been on 3. That's crazy.
Yeah, we've only been on 3.
When you said that, I was a little shocked, and I'm like, wait a minute. I guess that's right. Huh.
Dude, the best part about Coco Cay is the buffet line. That thing that we stopped there last year, and I think I just like rotated between the different buffet stations for like 3 hours. It was great.
Dude, if you go back there, you have to get a cabana, because you don't go stand in the buffet line. You open up the menu, and your attendant says, "What would you like?" And you say, "I want this."
It's so bougie.
And it appears. It was great, man. It was legit, dude.
And no one's judging your fat ass for going up to the buffet every 15 minutes.
That too, right? That too. They don't see that you ordered multiple pieces of grouper and fries and everything else, and they don't see that you ordered 17 pina coladas in the last 3 hours.
That's glorious. But you know what? We did stay out of the swim up bar though, because I don't know how it was when you were there, but there were like 5,000 people, like just packed nut to butt in the pool, and then like the swim up bar. So that there's no water left in that pool. It's just straight urine at that point.
Yeah, I don't use the I don't use the pool on cruise ships. Like, I don't get in the pool. That's just not happening. Because they're not that. They're, for starters, they're not that big, right? And they're always packed. right? You always see those people. It's like, man, that dude's been standing there and has been drinking a lot of beer for the last 2 hours and has not gotten out of that
letting
pool.
it
And
flow,
it's like, bro,
baby.
yeah, exactly. So I definitely don't use the pool on cruise ships. But no, man, it was good. It was fun. That was my first time in Grand Cayman. That was my first time in Jamaica, and I would absolutely go back to both those places. You know, not on a cruise, because I would like to spend some time in Grand Cayman for 2 reasons. Well, 3 reasons really. One, the water. When cruise ships go into Grand Cayman, they have to use tenders because it's too shallow
Nice.
up at the dock. So they dock, a couple 100 yards off the coast, and then they use tenders. We anchored in probably 30, 40, maybe 50 feet of water. You could see all the way to the bottom. The
That's
water
awesome.
was crystal clear. Like it was crazy. And the beaches, 7 Mile Beach, was just, I mean, dude, it was probably some of the nicest water, like just turquoise and clear as I've ever seen in my life. And the second reason is I didn't realize it. I always knew. You always hear about the offshore bank accounts in the Caymans and in movies and stuff like that. Well, I didn't know that there are hundreds of banks there, and there's a number of banks that have no signs, no nothing. You don't know their banks, right? Only select people know their banks. Well, that has drawn in watch dealers. There are authorized dealers there for Rolex, Richard Belize. Like, I mean, it is a big watch, shopping destination,
Didn't
and
know that.
they've got watch boutiques all over the place, and they, like I said, they've got authorized dealers for Rolex, everything. And the third reason is that place is swimming in Blanton's gold and Blanton's straight from the barrel. And we didn't get a chance to go to some of the less hit spots, but the prices on it right next to at the dock and the duty free were absolutely, it was absurd. So I left them on the shelf. But there's a lot of other places there. If you have if you spend a couple days there, you can go hit them and actually get decent prices on them. So,
which cruise lines have you gone on now?
We did the one on Carnival, our first one, and then the last 2 have been on Celebrity.
So we haven't done Celebrity.
Celebrity, again, Carnivals, like if you got little kids, like, because they had a big water park on the back of the ship, and so our kids were young when we did our first cruise, and so but they loved the water park. They were on the slides and in the under the water fountains and stuff all day. Carnival's a little bit older crowd. There was some kids, but there wasn't a lot of kids. If there were, they were mostly teenagers. And Celebrity, yeah. So Celebrity's a little bit older crowd, more our speed. And now I've heard great things about Norwegian as well, but we haven't been on Norwegian.
We did Royal Caribbean and we did Norwegian. Both of them were nice. Royal Caribbean, the size of that ship, at the time, it was the largest cruise ship in the world. Now they've got one that's bigger, but the size of Royal Caribbean was, dude, like it was incredible. I mean, there was just no way you could check out all of that. Norwegian was nice, but again, it was a smaller boat, and I guess going from Royal Caribbean to that, you notice the difference. And I mean, Norwegian was cool. They had like a remake of Central Park in the middle. I mean, the stuff is stupid. And completely cool. But yeah, it was definitely, I would do either or, but like if I had to choose one or the other, I'd go with the Royal Caribbean, the bigger boat. I mean, it's insane.
One dock next to a Royal Caribbean dock next to us in Coco Cay, because like I said, Carnival or Celebrity and Royal Caribbean are owned by the same company. And that ship docked next to us in the Royal Caribbean. Yeah, it was like, holy cow, that thing is massive.
Did I tell you when Gary and I, so one of our listeners, Gary, he was in the I forget where we were at. I think we're in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And he was on the Margaritaville, right? And he posted something on Facebook, and I happened to pull it up because we pulled into port, and I was like, "Oh shit!" I said, "Gary, we're here too, man. Let's link up and grab a beer," because he lives in Florida, and I live out here. And he's like, "Yeah, man, I don't know if that's gonna happen." I'm like, "Well, no, dude. We're like, which boat are you in? Because we're, the dock's right there. You got like 3 or 4 boats or whatever." He's like, yeah, man. So like, I'm on the Margaritaville, and all I see are shipping containers. So it's like, it's like, got it. I don't even think he got out the boat. I think he said, yeah, dude, we're just going to hang out here on the boat and chill and you know, then depart or whatever. But I think that's, you know, outside of just and again, I'm not an experienced, you know, I've only been on 2, but you know, it seems like, you know, one, the size of the ship, the amenities, but then also your dockings, right? Like where you're docking, are you close to port, or you know, over by the connexes or whatever? It seems like that seems to be the, you know, the discriminator between the different cruise lines.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Luke, because I kind of, you know, looked at him, and again, you know, the wife and I were still kicking around what we're going to do for our, you know, 25th anniversary. We want to take a big trip. And I, you know, it's kind of been looking at them, but the river cruises in Europe, you know, I've seen some of those, and those look pretty interesting. Yeah, they go down the Danube, the Rhine, like everything. And I wanted to ask Luke, since he spent a lot of time there, did he ever get a chance to go on one, or you know anybody that's been on them?
Yeah, Michelle's mom went on one last year, I think. I think it was last summer. And I got the idea that the one they chose was primarily for, you know, older folks, you know, which would be fine with me, honestly.
Hey, it'd be good with me too.
They started in Holland near Amsterdam. So they flew into Holland. They started in Holland, and it just made its way, I believe, down the Danube, made its way to the Danube and then down it. So I don't know, man. You know, a few times, like of course in Budapest and some spots in Germany, we would see those river cruises going by. And one time in Germany, I actually watched it dock, and some people chose to get off and go to this, you know, real historical old German town when there's a lot of World War II history there. And I mean, if the wife and I were going to go on a cruise, we'd either pick, you know, one of the Alaskan cruises or one of those river cruises. So, I mean, I asked Michelle's mom all the questions, and she was just, you know, it all sounded good to me. Was the food good? Yeah. You know, were the people nice? Yeah. Was it crazy? How were the cabins? And she had nothing but positive feedback, but she's never been on a cruise before, nor had she ever been outside the United States. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But and I'm sure cheap, there's a lot of different. No, they're not.
No,
the river cruises are expensive.
We were looking at I think the company was called Viking, and it was funny. So, you know, you're talking about, you know, it's an older crowd, myself, and so my father-in-law went, and my brother-in-law went, and so we were all sitting at dinner one after dinner, having, you know, just kind of having coffee, just hanging out, and you know, my wife and, you know, her sister was there, and my niece was there, and so we were all sitting around, and we got in the conversation of, you know, what would you have, because they have so many things going on a cruise ship at any given time. They have, you know, people come on, you know, they're speaking, they're giving, you know, talks about, you know, this, that, and the other. There's contests, there's events, shows, whatever. And I said, you know what, if I could put together a cruise, it would be for like men 40 and over, right? To bring their wives. Said dinner would be served at 4:00 every day. Right. Dinner service would end at like 6:30, and, you know, lights out on the ship would be at 8:30. And then we got to talking about like, okay, what subjects would you have people come on and talk about? And I was like, man, we would have, right. So there would be, you know, like Luke said, World War II history talks. There would be, you know, garage storage optimization, you know, seminar. Like it would be, you know, it would be stuff that us old guys are, you know, interested in. It'd be like, you know, we're gonna do like bourbon tastings and, you know, stuff like that. That would be some of mine that I would include on my cruise ship. But yeah, lights out at 8:30. No more music. No more, you know, crazy stuff. Everybody's got to go to bed.
But the ships are big enough that, I mean, like you could have the party.
I'm being somewhat facetious. It's
at our room, we didn't hear anything. You know, all I did was I was just happy I was stealing internet, man.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything either.
So I've just put in the chat there. There's an active shooter as we're recording this up in northern Idaho. They're targeting firefighters who were putting out a forest fire, and now somebody posted, and this is why I rolled my eyes and grunted. Let's see. It says police confirmed that 2 firefighters were down at the scene. a firefighter reported that the fire was deliberately set to lure responders into an ambush. Now, that I don't know if that's true or not. That's just on X, right? But there you go. Roger's going to pull it up. But this guy says, beware. TPA Sarah has been highlighting attack vectors like this, seemingly active situation going on. Oh, my God. We're talking about Sarah Adams. Jiminy Christmas, man. Ugh.
Yeah. I'm sure the Islamic extremist was like, firefighters in northern Idaho. That's my target.
Yeah.
That's going to get me.
We'll blend in up there.
Yeah. We won't stand out with, amongst all the, I won't say they're all white supremacists, but there's a large number of, far, I don't want to say far right, but that's what they are. Groups up in northern Idaho.
Occam's razor tells me it's one of two things, right? It's either what was the guy's name at Ruby Ridge? Sovereign citizen. Yeah, Randy Weaver type person, don't come on my land, or, Unabomber type thing, or it's a meth lab and they're high on their own supply and they're coming this way, and or a marijuana, illicit marijuana farm, something like that. That's Occam's razor for me. We'll see, but
I'm gonna go out on a limb. I agree with you, Luke. I'm gonna go on a limb and be like, it's a white dude. And probably not the guy that Sarah Adams has been predicting. So.
God, these people, dude.
Which ones?
Sarah Adams, like her group. I saw some of, Josh had a couple posts on there, and for those that don't follow her, and I don't follow her too much because it's the same. It's like, we're gonna get attacked. Well, no shit. You got to win, you got to where, you got by who, you got any details. I mean, just to sit there and say we're gonna get attacked. And then it happens in 4 years. I told you guys we were going to get attacked. I told you. I've been telling you this. Like, you've been telling us this for, 5 years now. So eventually you're going to be right. It's like the market, right? It's like, hey, the market's going to drop. Well, of course the market's going to drop eventually or whatever. But anyway,
so
Josh got on there. Josh got on there and was basically posting like, hey, man, you got any details, whatever. And I guess she wrote that book with some other dude. And I don't know if that other dude chimed in or if it was just somebody else. But then he had all the book cronies and you don't know what you're talking about. And da. And dude, you read her posts. And that my last thing with her, well, one, they all just dogpiled on Josh. Josh is stupid, doesn't know what he's talking about. It's coming. And then, the last thing she posted that I laughed at was, well, I gave the information to the federal government. So I just put federal government, ha, 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 like 50,000 times. Like,
see, but that's her out. That's her out. So we've got her grift narrowed down, and the more she talks, the more you can see the grift. That's her out. If when there is an attack or whatever, hey, Sarah, how come you didn't, do anything about this? Well, I did. It's the federal government's part. See, it's just like Benghazi. I
just want to be like, so how did that work? Like, how did, tell me how you gave it, quote unquote, to the federal government. How did that work? Because federal government's big. You gave it to the IRS? Yeah, exactly.
Gave it to Bureau of Land Management?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, did you do this in a cable from your house or how was that done? Or, you called the FBI tip hotline or?
Well, it's such poor tradecraft, right? I mean, even if she is getting this intel, it's probably 99% of it's probably open source. She's probably got some good tools, probably pays for some subscriptions and she probably knows a couple people. But it's just horrible tradecraft. She's putting it out like, this is what the Taliban's doing this week. Well, if you do have sources in Afghanistan, they're going to get killed because the Taliban, we think of them as dirt worshippers or whatever, but at those senior levels, they've got pretty decent counterintelligence. There's been more than one asset killed over there because of poor tradecraft, Yeah.
I think a large part of the information that she gets is, right. So obviously, she was an analyst at the agency, right? And I want to, we've said this before. She was an analyst, not a case officer. And she probably knows some folks who are still operational, still doing stuff, and it's around like, we're picking up some, somebody who's actually operational, still doing stuff. So like, maybe we don't know, and she's turning around and taking that, spreading that as the gospel. Or they're saying, hey, we got some stuff, but it's not corroborated. It's, single source, uncorroborated reporting. And she's turned around. She's like, I can get I can probably get 200,000 likes on this one, on this little piece right here, and Elon's going to pay me, Elon's going to pay me for my X account. All I got to do is throw that up there. I think a lot of her stuff was coming from that, honestly, because again, it's just specific enough to keep people on that hook, but it's not specific enough to do anything. And here's the thing: if I knew there was going to be a major attack in the United States, I would tell people.
And they'd probably listen.
Like, yeah. I would like, hey, you work at the World Trade Center. You should probably not go to work today because, there's rumblings of a big attack coming up, at this location. Like I wouldn't go, well, people need to buy the book.
Let's say, get in your mind, don't say it obviously on the podcast, but get in your mind the first person you'd call who would most likely do something with that. Okay. And then they put that in motion, and maybe something's going to be done about it. They're going to come back to you and ask what do you think they're going to ask you?
First thing they're going to ask is, how do you know?
Exactly. They're going to ask for your sources. And is she a journalist or is she an intel operator? She wants to pass herself off as an intel operator. Well, yeah, but she wants people to think this chick is actually a CIA. She's CIA. But
yeah,
if somebody comes and asks for sources, I can't tell you that. I'm a journalist. But they were going to ask you your sources, and then they're going to tell you to stop, and they're going to go take your sources.
Oh, yeah.
If you really want what's
cease
best.
And desist. Yeah. Cease and desist, and, there you go. She's a fraud. She blocked me on X.
That was a good job.
I can't believe it took her this long.
It took her a while. But yeah, it was, people need to prepare now because it's going to be catastrophic, this, that, and the other. Was like, okay. And it's like, but buy this book and it'll tell you, what you need to know. It's like, well, if you really cared, if you're, then just tell people, if you're this great and this is going to be so catastrophic, tell people what they need to do. Don't tell them, like, well, go buy my book. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
And isn't the information old by now? I mean, like you put, attack strategies or whatever's going to happen. You put it in a book. I mean, maybe the bad guys are reading that as well. Oh, maybe that's what she wants. She wants the bad guys reading it. Lead to some more sales.
Yeah.
Well, they are watching her account. That's for sure. So,
100%.
But the bad guys, I don't know. Maybe they figured out this is garbage because that's not what we're planning at all. But it's a good idea.
Well, and the thing is, she only has to be right once, right? So yes. She throws out a 1,000 different predictions. Yeah, you throw out 1,000 different predictions. She's right one time. It's like, see, I told you.
That's what she's going to do. Yeah. And she'll sell more.
That's 100% what she's going to do. 100% what she's going to do. And it's going to be it's not going to be some sophisticated attack. It's not going to be some 9/11 style attack. It's going to be some lone wolf who was radicalized on YouTube, who turns around and goes and, shoots somebody on the street in New York City. And she's going to be like, see, I told you. Nobody want to listen to me. I told you. And you're like, get the F out of here.
We have a acquaintance. I don't think he listens, but we all three know him, who is currently he's one of the deputy undersecretaries of defense. Right. And we were all like, dude, that is such a huge accomplishment. And it is. I'm not about to take away from him getting that. We're all really proud of him. But in the past 2 weeks, I've seen some senior people within Department of Homeland Security and DOD who look like they're about 25 years old. And in fact, one guy at DHS, one kid, is literally 24 years old. And he I don't know if I think he is a deputy undersecretary or something or other. I'm just like, how on earth is that possible? And then this kid who just got fired from DOD, he's found to be the leaker at the Pentagon. He's definitely the one who included the reporter on the snap. What were they using?
The signal
on the signal. He was the one that included the reporter. And it looks like this is the same guy who leaked the battle damage assessment. And literally, his name's Dan Caldwell. And he cannot be over 30 years old. And they're saying that, well, his connection with Hegseth was through the veterans, whatever Hegseth was doing for veterans. And this kid's a former Marine and all this. But my God, I mean, What do these people
like
do? How do they?
Sounds like it needs to be in jail.
Man, it's just.
Dude, I hope they
so-
prosecute him. I hope they prosecute
Yeah.
these folks to the fullest extent of the law. I mean, like you literally took a classified doc, intentionally released it, knowing the backlash that it was going to cause. And I'll put up the map here. I guess we can go ahead and talk about something that actually did happen. I'll kick it over to Luke with the U.S. airstrikes on Iran.
Mm.
But that's kind of what the leaks were about, right? Let me see if I can present this thing here for our viewers on YouTube. We just figured out we can actually share. Actually, Luke did. He was like, "Yeah, we should start sharing stuff." It's like, okay, cool.
We're trying to be not so low effort. Okay, so
yeah,
you've got
Since we only record once a month.
Sites. So what was it? Isfahan, Fordo, and
Natanz and
Natanz, yeah. So I'll give you my opinion first and then kick it to Josh. This has been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming. And if there ever wasn't a country that probably needed to be attacked in the Middle East, it's Iran. If you had to choose, if you had to choose, like we are going to invade one country and it's 2003, it's either going to be Iran or Iraq. Which one should we invade? I'd be Iran, 100% Iran. Now I would say that. Back then, I didn't quite understand, except I think I told this story in the podcast before. I was working someone in Bosnia at the time who was an Iranian dissident, basically. She was working for UNHCR, I think, and I was in Bosnia when we invaded Iraq, and that next day I had a meeting with her, and she was incredibly pissed off, at the U.S. And by virtue of being pissed off at the U.S., she's pissed off at me. And I was like, I don't understand. I thought Iran and Iraq were, I remember the wars they've had. And she goes, no, you invaded the wrong country. Those were her words. And she commenced to give me a 30-minute spiel on, of course, why Iran's bad. And I always knew they were, Hezbollah and all that. But yeah, Iran is a real source of trouble. And that goes back to 1979. I still believe to this day, if there's one group of folks who I think actually could be okay in the Middle East on their own, it would be the Iranians, the Persians, because Persians are not Arabs, contrary to what Josh thinks. I'm just joking. But Persians and Arabs, man, they haven't gotten along in a very long time. And I got more thoughts on this, but I think the airstrikes were a long time coming. I think 95% of Americans don't have the stomach for another ground operation in the Middle East at this point or any time forward. That's what I really like, Josh, is all the administration, everyone across the board is saying, look, this is on the Iranian people. If the Iranian people want regime change, we support them 100%, but we're not going to regime change their ass. And I like hearing that. That's the right answer, I think, and that's a lesson we've learned the hard way. A lot of us have learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I think the airstrikes on Iran were long time coming, long overdue. You take a look at what Iran's done really since the revolution in 79. American embassy hostages, the list goes on. Think about the, EFPs, Shia militia groups, Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, how many U.S. service members they killed and maimed. Long time coming. And, I wasn't sad to see that at all. I do not want to see another, prolonged, protracted ground war in the Middle East, because that's just not going to be good for anybody. And like you said, I think we, the current generation of GWAT vets, I think we've learned our lesson, and we know. And I think comes the good thing is that we have a Secretary of Defense that was part of that, and he's a staunch advocate of making sure if we're going to go do something, there's a very clear end state, and there's no getting stuck in the quagmire, because basically you have a disgruntled major, leading the Pentagon, and then you have, the E4 mafia at the Naval Observatory, So it's, both GWAT vets, and it's good to have that. What an amazing job by the pilots on that mission. Not just the pilots of the bombers and stuff, but the pilots, the tankers, coordinating that stuff, being on station where they needed to be when they were supposed to be, topping those dudes off. It was pretty impressive, especially when they came out and said, oh, by the way, the first massive ordnance penetrator cleared this ventilation shaft open, and then they dropped like 4 or 5 more down that same shaft. Following that, it's pretty amazing and pretty cool. Between that and what Israel did in the the weeks, month leading up to that, Iran is fairly decimated right now. And there's some Iranian, I don't know if they were a reporter or a talking head, Iranian social media person, or whatever they were, and they were like, well, what do you want us to do? It's like, what do you mean, what do we want you to do? We want you to take your freedom in your own hands and exploit this opportunity that we've given to you, to get rid of that oppressive regime. Like, that's what we want you to do. They want us to do it for them. And I'm not very supportive of that, as much as I hate the Iranian regime. So it's kind of my thoughts on it. It's kind of old news now, by and large.
Now, what's incredible about it is, and I agree, it's like, hey, strike, get out of there. We definitely don't want another protracted conflict or war there. I think Trump's response and kind of just piggybacking off what Josh said was, because the reporters are trying to goad them. Do you want regime change? And this is like, well, it's up to them, right? I mean, that was our big issue, as you guys have mentioned, is, hey, I hate to break this to you, but like, democracy is not for everybody. And sometimes you need a good dictator somewhere. Now, I'm not saying that the Ayatollah should be thrown out or should stay or whatever the case is. My point being is it's probably not for us to decide, right? Because you might find that, you remove that, you create that vacuum, and look what's happened in the Middle East over the last 2 decades where we've been involved. Sometimes the enemy is a lot better than the one that you don't know. What's crazy to me is, and it's in line with the leak and the media and just, the politicians on the left, and even a couple of Republicans and, some of the, those in the middle, they want Trump to fail at everything. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I made a post the other day. I'm like, Democrat profiles on X are starting to look like the UN, right? Because, they were reporting the, the Palestinians and the Mexicans and the cartels, and now you're Iranians. And it's just like, man, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter, that it's better for the world. Like, and I listened to a podcast, and I forget the name of it. I think it was on the Sean Ryan show. That
C3
shot to me. No, an actual good podcast. It was pretty educational, but he had me. It was funny because he had me listen to this thing, and this guy, I don't even know who he was, but tells you everything that you need to know about uranium and nuclear power. And when you look at, I mean, even with, I think Hegseth said it and a couple other folks on some interviews. So I did not realize the delta between where Iran is with their enriched uranium and what you need for actual energy, right? So long story short, and you guys can Google this or whatever you want to do, but you basically need like 3 to 5% enrichment for U-235 to use as energy. Now, they talk about things in the future where you're going to need 10, 20, 30% enrichment. And basically when you talk about, enrichment, you're talking about a refining process, right? So basically think of it like crude oil. You take crude oil out, you refine it, you get diesel, you continue to refine it, you get gasoline, yada, yada, yada. So it's the same thing with uranium. And I think, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think like they were at 65, 70, 75% enrichment, right?
It's just around between 60 and 70. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you sit here, and I think Hegseth, he threw it back on the reporter, because every reporter, it's funny because they're hitting all aspects of Trump's, administration, right? They're hitting every branch to see if they can get somebody to say something stupid or whatever the case is, because they want him to fail. And he put it back on them. He's like, hey, you tell me where you need 65, 70, 75% enriched uranium, because, well, you don't know that they're going for a nuclear bomb. Well, you know what? Considering that you need 3 to 5% right now to power a nuclear facility, and they're at whatever, 60, 65, 70, whatever that number is, that tells me that, yeah, they're going for a nuclear bomb. I mean, how dense are you? These people, and these people sit here and it's like they have this. It's not even. It doesn't even align with their policies, right? Because you could argue, well, you don't want to do anything, right? Because you can drag us into a war. It's not even about policies or what they truly believe in. Their policy is just anti-Trump. It doesn't matter what he does. So, and I know I'm jumping around here a little bit, but the other day you had, was it Rwanda and Congo? It was Rwanda and Congo, right?
Congo,
Signed the peace treaty. So in the White House, and I caught a snippet on, I think it was MSNBC or CNN, one of the other networks. And the lady's arguing like, well, it's not done yet. And they had the Republican guy, I forget what his name is, but he's like, no, like you should watch the news because 3 hours ago they were in the White House signing the treaty, and she's like, no, you're wrong. It's not done. It's like, no, they literally just signed this. Maybe you should watch the news before you come on here and talk about this stuff. But it doesn't matter. Their policy has been, whatever Trump does, it's wrong. It's bad. I think when you look at, the Rand Paul, the Rand Pauls of the world and the libertarians, this is my problem with the libertarians is you can't just sit back and do nothing all the time. Right now, I'm in line with a lot of their individual freedoms and smaller government and this and that. I love the conservatism, but they really have this, hey, you don't interfere globally at any cost. And not that I think that again, you got to balance it, right? That's why you have a cabinet. You got to sit there and you got to say, hey, where are the existential threats or the potential existential threats? And do we need to take action on that? You can't just sit back forever and do nothing nowhere. And that's one of the, in my opinion, anyway, with the libertarians, if they could actually develop like a rational foreign policy, I'd probably get behind them. But just the hands off, I don't think you can do that. But that was pretty disheartening for me from that end. But from the, from the actual attacks, it needed to happen. I mean, Israel did this, in the 80s with Iraq, right? Didn't they strike one of their facilities overnight? I think it was like early 80s, right? So it's like, hey,
Iraq,
yeah, don't put it beyond the Israelis to do that. And I was actually kind of surprised because I thought that we would arm the Israelis. And again, maybe it's just you couldn't do it because of the size of these things, right?
They don't have a platform to carry it.
Right. So that, that's what I was thinking is that we would continue to try to just feed them. But, I guess the logistics are probably too difficult on something like this. But I guess I saw pictures today. You see, they got like excavators and stuff out there. I'm just wondering, because now even the news, and again, from the podcast that you shared, Luke, they're like, well, you didn't get all the enriched uranium. It's like, well, I think the actual target was the centrifuges and the facility itself. Now you're going to have stockpiles. Now I'm thinking if I'm Iran, I probably got many stockpiles of enriched uranium, around the country. And even with that, it's like from what I understand, and I'm no nuclear expert, but you don't need a lot of it. So it's not like you've got these massive warehouses and semi trucks, full of this stuff. And it'd be nice to take it out if you could, but I think, the target itself was the facility, but it just goes back to, it doesn't matter what it is. They are looking for any reason, for that mission to have failed. And, it's disheartening, man.
Well, yeah, back to the uranium enrichment. I don't know. I do know that it's a process involving gases. That's why they use centrifuges. So, yeah, there's no, like Roger was saying, there is no commercial application for above 60% enriched uranium. Zero. There's none that I know of. I don't think there's anything. It's just too volatile to do anything with. That's why they use it for a bomb, But getting from the magic number is 60%. Because apparently there's a cascading effect where getting from 60 to 90%, and 90% is what you need for an effective weapon. Getting from 60 to 90 is a relatively quick process. And we've said that before on this podcast. It's like when we say, or when anybody says Iran is 6 months away from a bomb, people are saying they're 6 months away from being nuclear capable. And that's not just the having enough uranium. It's like almost a triad type thing. You got to have enough uranium. You've got to be able to assemble a warhead that fits on top of whatever delivery vehicle or inside whatever delivery vehicle you're going to use to effectively, give that love, that nuclear love to somebody. So yeah, it's more than just enriching the uranium. It's, and I'm sure they were hitting other sites like, the facility where they actually put them together, because yeah, you have a ball of uranium Well, you got to effectively put that together in a gun type, configuration like Little Boy, I think. Yeah, it's Fat Man and Little Boy. Little Boy was the gun type. So that's the one they'd be using. And, again, it goes back to the Michael Crichton, the Gale man amnesia effect, where it's like you read a news article and you're a nuclear expert, you're a nuclear physicist, and you read a news article, you're like, oh, this is all off. This is all off. They're full of crap. They don't know what they're talking about because I'm an expert in this. But you turn the page and you read an article about the economy and you're like, oh, whoa, that's very good information. You just forgot that this newspaper is full of crap based on the first article you read, right? And I'm seeing that a lot. Well, I don't understand, what's the big deal with Iran having 60% enriched uranium? They have a right to do that. It's like, there's so many aspects like that podcast I sent you that you do not understand about this process. And further, you don't understand the geopolitical implications of Iran having an effective nuclear weapons program. That destabilizes the entire Middle East. Hell, Israel's never even officially said that they have a capability. Everybody knows it, but they never officially stated it. Way back in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, who was developing a nuclear weapons production capability? And they basically had it? South Africa under apartheid. And the whole world came together and go, whoa, we can't have this. Because now it just changes the balance of power throughout the entire continent. There are ripple effects, because as soon as Iran does their first nuclear test, and they've shown that they can launch something, medium range ballistic missile, something that almost goes into orbit. Next thing you know, Saudi Arabia is going to test one because they have no choice. Because what do we say up front? Arabs are different than Persians. And going back before Islam, Arabs and Persians have really not liked each other very much at all. I mean, there's been the wars go back thousands of years to recorded history. So people, what people who say for a moment that Iran shouldn't have or should be able to continue on with this research, or I don't understand the big deal. In my mind, I just have to shut it down because it's arguing with a wall. It's willful ignorance, but since it has anything to do with Israel, well, then it must be bad, and, kick it back to you, Josh, after this one thing, you mentioned, the pilots, and it wasn't just one pilot. It was, I don't know how many dozens and dozens of U.S. pilots were involved in that, from refueling to, you had your, it's not an AWACS, but it's that JSTARS stuff in the area.
Yeah.
Coordinating coordinating the airspace, all these things, man. Those guys flew for 36 hours or something like that total. And I'm sure it's a crew of maybe 4 or 6, and there's bunks in the tiny bunks in that B-2 bay. I'm sure, they're doing shifts and stuff. I just, it's just, it makes you feel good to be American. It's like flexing a little bit, this awesome, display that we did. And, those stealth bombers, what makes them stealthy isn't just their design, the physical design of them, reflecting or the radar signals bouncing off them. It's how they fly using that JSTARS aircraft. It's huge deconfliction. So that weapons platform, the reason it costs so much is because it's more than just that platform. Think of like a U.S. carrier group, right? It's not just the carrier. It's the minesweeper. It's the 2 submarines attached to it. It's the cruiser. It's the battleship. A carrier group is something like 14 ships, right? It's similar like with these B-2 raids. It's more than just that one platform. There are tons of people involved, or tons of airframes involved, and probably some ground-based stuff too. It's just super impressive. Came at the right time. And man, last week was a great week for Trump, man. Great week for Trump with the Supreme Court, showing that even the CIA came out and said, well, that battle damage assessment, we're assessing that it actually did do a lot of damage, because it wasn't just Fordo that got hit. It was Natanz. It was Isfahan. Like I said, I mean, there are different stages of assembling a nuclear weapon. Getting enough plutonium or uranium is just one step. You got to put that thing together too, but great week for Trump last week. Like him or hate him, man, he had a good week. We'll see how next week goes.
Yeah, last thing I'll say on on Iran, and you talk about we're not going to allow them to have nuclear capability, and people are like, oh, everybody on the left, and Roger's like they sound like the United Nations. They look like the United Nations on X too, because they add a little flag of every country that they want to stand next to. So now we have profiles with the Ukrainian flag, the Palestinian flag, every flag except for ours. And for on that piece, I just kind of, it goes back to let's say you have somebody. Oh, I'll tell you a quick story about it. And it was like, okay, yeah, now stuff has gotten real. So I'm the staff duty NCO one day, and this was when I was in Alaska, and my runner, I'll make this quick. My runner goes outside to smoke a cigarette, and he comes back in. He's like, "Hey, Big Sarge, like you got an issue in the parking lot. You got to come out here." And we'll go outside, and there's this lady that's throwing a whole bunch of stuff out of the back of a truck, right? It's men's clothes, and it's like fishing equipment and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, all right, whatever. Hey, ma'am, don't, all right, what troop is your husband in? But let's get the first side over here. Let's talk, blah, blah, blah. And so it wasn't an issue, because at the time I was like, well, the only threat is her throwing stuff in the parking lot. It's not a big deal. Well, then she pulls a fuel can out of the back of that truck and starts pouring gas. And then it was like, okay, I looked at my runner. I was like, go call the MPs right now. Because now she has displayed, all right, she has the intent, right? She has the capability and the intent that she is about to set all this stuff on fire. And it's like somebody in your face telling you, I'm going to whip your ass as soon as I get this gun loaded. I'm gonna kill you as soon as I get this gun loaded. But what are you gonna do? You're just gonna stand there and let them do it after they've killed 10 people in your witness? But come on, that's not just, no. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Period. And Luke hit a lot of the points, and Roger, it just can't happen. Yeah, big win, man. SCOTUS. States can defund Planned Parenthood at their will, which is a massive win for life, because they're nothing but abortion factories, and every single one of them should disappear and go away. There were some more wins, in SCOTUS, and yeah. Dude, Trump had a, and I know I'm missing a few things. But yeah, Trump had a great week. And Mike Lee's stupid land sale of public land that finally got pulled out of the big beautiful bill. So that's good. That's gone. And for the North Carolinians, Tom Tillis has announced he is not seeking re-election, which is glorious. Which is glorious, because Tom Tillis has not been a faithful Republican for a very long time. So there will be a changing of the guard in North Carolina in the Senate. Hopefully they put up a viable Senate candidate and don't try and run some idiot like Mark Robinson, who just can't win. It'll be unfortunate to see North Carolina have a Democratic senator.
Real quick, I'll go over some of the SCOTUS rulings, and it's sad that it's actually come to this, because you just see how politicized the lower court systems are, and you see how politicized even some of those on the Supreme Court are. And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, everybody that was appointed by Trump or Bush is good. And some of like when you look at ACB's rebuke of Ketanji's, whatever that, like she literally wrote full stop in her opinion. I mean, one, you're a moron for doing that. Like your staffer clearly wrote that, but these justices held different positions not 2-3 years ago, right? And it's just, hey, I don't like Trump. I don't agree with this. Not that it's based on, the Constitution, not it's based on precedents, not it's based on, other laws. But you look at transgender rights. Tennessee they upheld a law saying Tennessee can ban certain gender feminine care for transgender youth. Which is going to allow, obviously, a lot of states, probably red states, to continue to do that, or to do that itself. A big one was religious freedom. So if the basically if the school or the class does not, if they start teaching a LGBTQ whatever curriculum or have a class on it or whatever, they have to provide an opt-out. And if they don't provide an opt-out, then the parents have the ability to withdraw their kids from school, which is stupid to me anyway, because I have the, as a parent, I should be able to withdraw my kid regardless, no matter what. I mean, I know they got truant laws and, truancy laws and stuff like that, but you look at immigration. So now we can deport people to whatever country we want in the world. So I guess we can send old boy back to El Salvador, or we can send him to Haiti or whatever else. But, the biggest one probably, and this is what's going to, obviously won't be covered till next year, but birthright citizenship, man. And it's interesting because, and I don't know that ever, I don't know that ever passes the way that Trump has it written, but basically what the ruling from SCOTUS was, lower court rulings are only applicable to the people that they impact or affect, i.e. the people who filed the complaint. So like if you're in Eastern Texas or if you're in Southern Arizona or something like that, you file suit and, they put a stay on it or whatever, then that just pertains to the area within that court's jurisdiction, not nationwide. And the reason that's important is because it prevents the, 873 some odd federal judges from determining national policy, right? You would just go out and you would continue to judge shop. Now, what that does mean is folks in that particular area would still, and here's where the challenge comes in, right? They would still have birthright citizenship, but in theory, the rest of the country would not due to the executive order. So, and I don't, again, that's going to go to SCOTUS next year. I think, step one was just the district court judges. The actual birthright citizenship will probably go up next year. And I don't know that actually stands the way it is. I mean, I understand the readings behind it and I understand the whole premise, behind the anchor babies, but hey, man, I could be surprised. I mean, a lot of that stuff they look at, especially when they look at the historical context of it and say, hey, this was brought about because of slavery and that type of stuff. You never know with a conservative SCOTUS. I mean, they might rule in favor of Trump, but if anything, it's a win because now it at least prevents some random, Delaware federal judge from just determining, hey, I'm the commander in chief now. I can stop the military. I can order the military. I can do whatever. What's also interesting with, Ketanji Jackson's, her opinion and then ACB was, and it kind of goes back to what Josh, a quote that he had stated several times earlier, ACB was basically like, hey, it's not our job to enforce this stuff. Like we tell you it's constitutional, it's not constitutional, whatever, but that's not the Supreme Court's job to enforce it. And Jackson believes, well, yeah, it is. Like, hey, the Supreme Court should effectively be able to say, Luke, you're going to do this or we're going to put you in prison. We were going to arrest you, we're going to try you, and we're going to put you in prison. Actually, I don't even know if you get tried because you'd be defying a court order, right? So it's interesting when you go back and forth, but I would say that some of those folks out there that haven't read the ACB rebuttal to it, it's pretty damning, I think, towards how much of an idiot she is. And one thing that does dishearten me with the SCOTUS, and again, I mean, we've had rulings all over the place. You get some of the folks that rule, what we believe are, conservatively, and some that don't, this and that. But I don't know, man. Are there three dumber justices than Sotomayor, Jackson, and Kagan? I mean, some of them are they're just completely, and well, I guess I put it this way. It goes back to, it's not even what they believe in or based on the Constitution or fact. It's anti-Trump. Like, I just don't like Trump, so this is how I'm going to rule. Because they sound like morons.
Yeah, based on ideology and not logic or law or anything. I'd say of those three, Kagan is probably the least dumb. But the birthright citizenship thing, it's just gone too far. We used to be a high trust society here in the West, high trust, right? Now we're a low trust. So you have something in place where, somebody's on vacation here or whatever from France and, she went into labor. Kid was born 1 month premature. Oh, that kid has the option to be a U.S. citizen. It's a feel-good thing until it starts being taken advantage of, right? And I think Roger is pro, I believe, based on the fiery text conversation we had a month or two ago. I think Roger is pro birthright and Josh is anti, as usual. I'm one of these that's like, man, I like the spirit of the law and that, but the spirit's been super corrupted. Now, one thing, Josh, I'm gonna kick it straight over to you because you have a lot to say on this. I think the one thing I think we all three have always had a problem with is, somebody comes over here on vacation, again, from France. It seems like a lot of people think they are afforded every right of a U.S. citizen. And I have just never agreed with that. And, when we back when we were counterintelligence special agents, this has affected our job somewhat, and we had to actually wade through some of these. We didn't know we were wading through complicated legal precedent at the time, but it is a thing, and it's not settled law as to whether, when somebody comes over here, they're afforded every right as a U.S. citizen. I mean, you can't just prima facie on its face, you can't say that they're afforded every right of a U.S. citizen. They're absolutely not. They're not allowed to carry a gun, are they? They're not allowed, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, what rights are they afforded and what rights are they not? I tend to be like side on the Germany aspect of this. Let's sign a SOFA, not a sofa, but let's sign a status of citizen agreement where everyone agrees what rights your citizens have when they're in this country. Because as it stands right now, Canada definitely going to be the 51st state. I think Canadians should definitely be afforded more rights than like a Somali maybe who's just here visiting. You know what I'm saying? But definitely, I don't think that all of them should be afforded every right. If we want to monitor them while they're here, 100%, we should be able to. There's no reasonable expectation of privacy if you're not a U.S. citizen or have no status whatsoever. Because when you come into a country, you have a certain status according to immigration and custom. But those statuses are not, it's almost like if you have a student visa, like that joker at Brown or wherever he's from, if you have a student visa, it's almost like, oh yeah, you have every freedom of speech right there is. I don't agree with that, man, at all.
No, and this all started in 1982 with Plyer versus Doe, when the Supreme Court ruled that undocumented immigrants, read illegal aliens, have the same rights as U.S. citizens, and it was specifically, but the case was specifically decided on kids attending school, kids illegal aliens attending school, and that they were supposed to be afforded the same rights as a U.S. citizen under the due process. Okay, well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, and we would do this would take multiple episodes to unpack it all. I am not a fan of birthright citizenship. I am a fan of it, in its original context, right? When the amendment was written, but I am not a fan of it. What has been, like you said, it's been bastardized, to what it is today. I don't think somebody can should be able to come into the United States illegally or legally, dump a kid, and now all of a sudden, they've got a family member who's a, U.S. citizen just because they were here, when they pushed it out, and, they get to tether themselves to that individual, and suck off the teat of the American taxpayer. That's just not that is not what the founders intended. That is not even remotely close to, what it was supposed to be. And yet here we are. And you bring up a really good point. If we say, okay, they are supposed to be afforded constitutional rights, does that mean they get, people coming into the United States, immigrating to the United States, or not even immigrating, visiting? Do they get to go? Can they go buy a gun? Can they vote? Right? So you go to a foreign country, you can't, you know what? The three of us cannot go to Mexico and buy land right now. There are some hoops you got to go through. There are some gates you got to get through to be able to purchase land in Mexico. But yet somebody from Mexico can swim across a river, come in our country illegally, drop a kid, and that kid's a U.S. citizen, and then is afforded all rights, inherent with the Constitution. That's just wrong. All right. So I think the ruling is good. I hope, I hope Trump, I hope there's some stuff that's put in place to, further this discussion. Because now that you got the Supreme Court, siding with him on that, now you've got to get a case challenging it, back up to in front of the Supreme Court because it didn't, from what I understand, this case didn't challenge that specific thing. It was it was something in there about the processes of, some procedures and stuff that it challenged it. They said no, they decided with him on that. And to Roger's point, ACB's comment about Ketanji Brown Jackson's what she wrote on it was, I mean, dude, I'm no fan of ACB. I don't think she has been a reliable conservative, but that was legit. Her response was legit. She was like, "We're going to address this, but not even addressing it because it was that dumb." Because Ketanji Brown Jackson is an idiot. She is not smart. She was an absolute DEI hire. But this really speaks to a larger issue to fix this, and that's immigration in general. And we've talked about this a lot, on C3, but to fix this and to keep these anchor babies, out of the United States, we have to fix the immigration system. And my fix for the immigration system is a 50-year moratorium on immigration. For the next 50 years, nobody gets to immigrate to the United States, period. That's my solution. For starters. Period. The end.
So I mean, what if?
Well, I hate that that term "full stop." It's so ridiculous.
Here's the thing. I mean, I always like to inject a little nuance into Josh's hard stances, and I think of like Operation Paperclip, right? In times of need or industries of extreme need, there's some pretty damn good schools, pretty smart, PhDs in physics and rocket science and stuff like that overseas. The best come from here, no doubt. But there are folks, I'm a fan of the golden ticket thing. Hey, if you can pay, go the Austrian way. If you can pay $25 million and pass a rigorous background, and
I like it,
maybe, but you're still going to get bad actors in there. So I get that. But like, I'm in a fan of halting 98% of immigration over 50-year time. I hear what you're saying, but I do think that there is some value. I do think that some immigrants do prove pretty valuable. And look at Elon Musk. He if that was our policy, we wouldn't have an Elon Musk. But yeah, I mean, I hear you though. I mean,
we need to be selective. Right? We need to be selective about it. Is the point? It's not just everybody. And I think when you look at the 14th Amendment, and it would not surprise me. And I think so that the ruling, as Josh was talking about, was actually tied to the lower district court justices. So I think this is going to have to be brought up back through, and I don't even know the location of it. It might have been Texas. I think it's going to have to actually come back through that district court and make its way back up to SCOTUS. But it would not surprise me based on what I've seen from the DOJ. So the 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, right? So there's a reason why they put that in there. There's a reason for that. So I think, for me, the way I look at it is, if you are here legally in whatever status, I don't care what it is. And it wouldn't surprise me if SCOTUS rules this way. If you're here legally, the U.S. has accepted that you might have, you might come here and have a kid or whatever the case is. U.S. has done that. You're here legally. We gave you permission to come here. That's fine. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're like, hey, if you're an illegal alien and you drop a kid, that kid is not a U.S. citizen. Now, that's going to become very, very tough to prove because especially now you're looking at state to state, right? There's no federal birth certificate. So you go state to state and you get out here in a lot of your Western states. You might not even have a birth certificate, that type of thing. So, I think a lot of that stuff is there's going to be a lot of loopholes there, but it wouldn't surprise me if they said, hey, if you're here legally, you're good to go. If you're not here legally, that, sorry, no birthright citizenship.
Do you know how? Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, if we're going to do that, all right, if we're going to do that, then you need to go back. You need to revisit the Hart-Celler Act of 1965. Right. And because prior to that, preference was given to, Northern and Western Europeans. And then we decided that, no, we should let everybody in. And guess what you have now? Think about New York City on September 12th, 2001. And if you would have said, guess what? In 2025, you are going to have as the Democratic nominee for your mayor an Islamic extremist who is spouting socialist and communist ideas.
That dude, man. Wow.
But that's what the immigration system gave us, right? It gave us that dude's been here 7 years. 7 years. And now he's a Democratic taking front runner. Now, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. That's a Democratic Party for you. But at the end of the day, we cannot continue our immigration policy the way it is. We can't.
Yeah, you got to be selective.
Right?
I mean, that's the thing. You got to be selective.
You have to be extremely selective. Extremely selective. Like there should probably only be 50 people that should be allowed to immigrate into the United States on any given year. Total.
But who's going to pick the lettuce from my salad?
Right? I mean, who will pick the cotton? Dude, I've seen so many of those posts from the left. Like, well, who's picking our produce now? It's like, you racist ass people, man.
Well, it's like with
you gotta abolish the Hart Celler Act. Get rid of it.
With Hamdani. Is that his name? Hamdani? Am I getting that right?
Yeah,
Mamdani.
He's a 9/11 brown guy. He's a 9/11 brown guy, not a 7/11 brown guy.
Who was he's from Uganda, I think. But
yeah,
that's where H.L. Mencken's quote comes in. And I've been thinking a lot about some of the stuff Josh says. They deserve what they get, and H.L. Mencken said the voters deserve what they get and they deserve to get it good and hard, and it's like, we go back to Iran. Let's bring it back to Iran, right? They're not ready for revolution yet. What do you expect us to do? Well, I guess life's just not hard enough yet, and if it gets hard enough on that person who didn't vote for him, who is going to vote Republican, they're either going to leave the state or they're going to start rattling some cages, and they're just not there yet, right? And, Josh the Gulag.
They're going to cut a deal, dude. There's no way that dude.
With
I tell you, anything, yeah,
he's going to win the mayor race.
He'll win.
I mean, who knows? I mean, I know there's a lot of talk with, Jeffries didn't endorse him. There's a lot of talk of Eric Adams, who's now running as the independent. I mean, dude, I told you guys, I'm like, hell, I want to donate to his campaign. I think they're going to get it. They should get exactly what they're voting for, But regardless, like if the guy makes it to the election, he'll get millions of votes, millions.
The problem is this: is a lot of the people who think he's awesome and are going to vote for him, they're going to realize shortly after he's in office, maybe a year after he's in office, that this is a really bad idea. And what are they going to do? They're going to leave. And where are they going to go? That virus is going to wind up in the Carolinas.
North Carolina.
They're going to wind up in Florida. Yeah, exactly. Right. We're already seeing it, in the metro centers here. That virus is going to wind up in Arizona. They're going to wind up in Texas. Right. Those people don't have to stay to suffer their consequences. Right. They get what they voted for. They should get it good and hard. Well, they're not, because they're only going to stay around until it really sucks. And they're going to be like, we're leaving, and they're going to take their shitty ideology elsewhere. Mafan, you know what? If you voted for him, you don't get to leave until he's out of office. And then for 4 years afterwards, too. You voted for him, you don't get to move. Dude,
so
what it should be.
He's going to have a hard time getting any kind of property tax raised, because he put, and as of 2 hours ago, it was still up on his website, that he's going to raise property tax in white neighborhoods. Well, dude, and he was challenged on that on CNN or one of these, and he stuck by his guns. He's like, no, I'm gonna leave it on the website. Well, dude, you leave that on the website and try to raise property tax in any neighborhood at all, any lawyer, they're gonna put this, like, look, this is illegal. He's raising it based on demographic. You can't do that. So that shows me he's not that smart, and he's a total ideologue. But Josh, the Gulag Guard. So, Josh, from 1936 to 1951, how many World Series did Joe, off the top of your head, how many World Series did Joe DiMaggio participate in? From 1936 to 1951.
Oh, man. It's got to be Damon could. Yeah, I was about to say Damon could answer this immediately. I was about to say it's probably almost a dozen.
So it's 9, and the only reason it's probably not 12 is because he took, he went off on his side gig and did World War II. Yeah. And apparently, they sent him to Hawaii, because we can't have Joe D, dying in combat. And he gained 10 pounds. He was on the beach drinking every day, and he was so ashamed of himself that he continuously applied for combat assignments. They wouldn't give it to him. But while he was doing that, and Josh, I guarantee you, now Josh is like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. But based on what, the type of language you're using, his parents were immigrants, and they were classified as enemy aliens. They couldn't go beyond 5 miles outside of their home, outside of San Francisco. And they actually took his dad's boat and confiscated it. He wasn't allowed to fish in San Francisco Bay anymore because they were enemy aliens. That sounds like something Josh would do, man, with all this stuff you're doing. And if your policy was in place back then, we wouldn't have the great Joe D nor Operation Paperclip, man. Come on. You got to have some exceptions in there somewhere.
No, because that was prior to the Hart-Sellers Act.
You're right.
Right. Again, I'm good. I'm good with immigration, but it's been abused. It's like everything else. It's like the Second Amendment, right? And we can talk about the big beautiful bill, here shortly. But again, the GOP and the Senate completely spineless that they pulled the Stop Act out of the big beautiful bill. We can talk about that in a few, but with the immigration piece, we have to stop letting people who hate us immigrate into our country. We have got to stop it. If you are an outspoken communist, if you are an outspoken socialist, you don't get to come to our country. It should be that simple. It really should. You don't get to come to our country if you hate us. You see the Egyptian guy who kicked the CBP dog in the airport?
Oh, yeah.
Like, kicked him. It's like, dude, they should have just went John Wick on that guy. They should not have sent him back to Egypt. That guy should have died in that airport right there. Right?
Assaulted an officer, man.
Yeah, it's
those dogs are considered law enforcement officers.
Yes,
he assaulted an officer, man. Fuck that guy.
Yep.
But you look at that, and we all know what Arabs think of dogs. Arabs hate dogs. They absolutely hate them. And so do Persians and stuff. They don't like dogs. The only reason they had them is, that's an early warning system. And so they don't come here. You take a look at Joe DiMaggio's, parents. They came to the United States. Yeah, they probably lived in an Italian neighborhood. They probably spoke some Italian in the house. But I guarantee you when they were out, they were speaking English. They assimilated. The current immigrants that we get in this country do not assimilate. Partly because the United States is stupid and we put them all together. Let's settle all the Somalis in the same neighborhood in Minneapolis. Let's settle all the Iraqis in Dearborn, Michigan in the same neighborhood. Let's settle all the Syrians in Florida in the same neighborhood instead of treating them like enemy combatants and separating them and be like, no, you are going to go live in Salt Lake City, Utah. And guess what? You're going to be the only Syrians in town. Figure it out. Assimilate into American society. But we don't do that. And then we're like, no, everybody can keep their customs. No, they can't, because there are customs that are incompatible with the United States Constitution. They're just not compatible with it. But yet we allow that in our immigration policy because, we got to be politically correct. Well, no. Hart-Sellers Act, gone. And guess what? Moratorium, unless you are an Elon Musk, you don't get to come in. Not everybody has a right to come to the United States. That is not your birthright when you were born in a foreign country. I'm sorry, but that's the golden ticket. The golden ticket is that you were born here, and not because, somebody was on vacation or, your mom and dad swam across the Rio Grande and didn't come here illegally. Like, not happening. It has to stop. It absolutely has to stop. The Great Replacement theory, it's not a theory. It's happening, and we're watching it.
Would you acknowledge, though, I mean, in order to, putting a scalpel to this, at the end of the day, you're probably right, Josh. It's like the problem is so out of hand now. You got to take an axe to it. You can't do the scalpel thing. The heartbreaking part of the axe thing is, there was an Afghan who came. He tried to take the legal route to come in because Taliban was going to track him down in Pakistan and kill him because he attended an American university in Kabul. So he he was like, you know what? Everyone's coming through the southern border. I'm going to buy my platinum ticket. I think he spent somewhere $35,000. Took him all the way to the border, and he crossed and came across like everyone else, claimed asylum. Now he had a legitimate asylum claim, and now that dude is his father's fairly wealthy. I won't say what he does there in Afghanistan, but this dude has now opened up 3 food trucks in Alexandria. He's doing pretty well. It's like, that's the kind of person you want, man. That's what this country is supposed to be, but he is the rare exception. He is
does he love the United States?
Well, yeah, he's not. He's like, the Mormons, Jack Mormons who
drinking after church at night.
Yeah. He is a Jack Muslim is what he is. Like he enjoys a drink every once in a while. He don't pray 5 times a day. He kind of fasts a little bit, but yeah, man, he's contributed to the economy. He managed to get his wife out of Iran to the States, and they are now married. And it's like, okay, this is a resourceful, smart dude. And it's like, but it's like, that's what you want all of them to be. You want all of them to be, the cream of the crop like that. But again, of everyone coming across the border, hell, it's not even 0.01. It's 0.001.
Yeah, those are the exceptions.
The rare exceptions. And there was another Russian. This dude was protesting the election, the last one where Putin got elected, and he thought it'd be a good idea to protest that. And FSB started coming after his ass. And this guy is literally a scientist. Dorky looking Russian dude, speaks really good English. And it's like, okay, this guy's probably going to make something of himself. So my mind tends to go to those, anecdotal things I saw. But at the same time, Josh, I saw tens of thousands of people who I know, our tax dollars are going to go straight to benefits for them. And it's going to sit there and take it. It's just you got to do the axe approach. I agree with you.
I look at it, I look at it as it's a severed limb, and you can try. Oh, well, maybe we just do a little pressure dressing right here. Maybe we do something right here. Maybe I can rub some quick clot right here. No, you got to throw a tourniquet on it. And right now we've got to turn the faucet off. You got to turn the faucet completely off. And how long it stays off, I don't know, but it needs to stay off for a while until we can get this under control. Because we have a country full of people who hate the country because of, bring us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And it's not working out. What we're doing right now is not working. So, the definition of insanity is, everybody knows what it is.
So to put it in perspective for some numbers, so about 72,000 U.S. citizens are born, and this is just Google, are born each year to temporary visa holders to include foreign students, guest workers, and tourists. Estimated 39,000 of those births occur students, guest workers, and other long-term temporary visitors. Then you have about another 180,000 a year that are born to illegals. And I do think that when they parse, if this thing ever makes it to the Supreme Court, I do think that is where the line is going to be. I think when those folks that are here legally and whatever the status is, I think they're going to be granted the citizenship. So the 72,000 a year. And I think the illegals, if they do restrict that, I think it's going to be restricted. It's where, hey, if you're illegals, you're not subject to our jurisdiction, and it's not going to happen.
So we haven't even talked about this. Think about all of those Chinese citizens over here on student visas, right? Think about them dropping kids, and now that kid's a U.S. citizen, and basically the CCP is raising them to hate us, to steal our stuff.
Yeah,
that's why I'm. You got.
But that goes back to where you have to be selective. Yeah, no, I do. I don't disagree with anything you said, but that goes back to where you just have to be selective on who you bring in, and we're not going to. That's the problem. It ain't going to happen.
Well, and you can't be selective right now. You can be selective in 10, 15 years, but right now, it's la-di-da-di. Shut it down. Shut it all down.
Yeah, I don't think we see that happen, but
he's
Well,
done.
no, of course not, because we're stupid.
The admin's done a good job, though, man. We called it on this podcast. It's like you eliminate the pull factor. You eliminate those pull factors, and it's going to stop. And what did it do? It's effectively stopped as far as people claiming asylum.
Once those people are like, I'm going to Gitmo, nah, that ain't happening.
I'm going to alligator Alcatraz.
No. That's awesome. That alligator Alcatraz thing is awesome. And it's
I'm going to El Salvador. No, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, nah.
Dude, the alligator Alcatraz thing is so good. And people, dude, that thing's getting protested hard right now. Because, people are like, this is a war crime. This is inhumane.
War crime.
Dude, it is wild, right? And now this group has come out saying that the alligator Alcatraz is being built on native land, and they're trying to fight. They filed in court protesting that it was native land, and the judge came back and automatically denied it because they were like, that's actually the Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport. It was built in 1968.
So it's not federal land then?
No.
Good. They need to build a Dollar General right next to it then.
Yeah, hell yeah. Do it. That airport's been there since 1968. It's fairly abandoned, but they use it, student pilots training, stuff like that. And all they're doing is putting tents and shoes out there. And guess what? This is where we're putting all the legals. But yeah, dude, I mean, it's in a swamp. You can run if you want to, but you've got, venomous snakes, gators, you've got boa constrictors, mosquitoes. Like, enjoy, have fun with that.
Well, now that I think it would be a fun discussion. Now that the land grab is out of the way, that's not going to be a thing now. Maybe we could go back and forth on what you think about, federal lands. And I can't remember. We've done the research. It's between 250 and 400 million acres of federal land in the United States. And I think Mike Lee's bill was, let's put it up for sale and pay down the national debt, which is whatever. But before I kick it to you, Josh, and your stances on it, I know you've done a lot of looking into this, and I know that that a lot of this land is a lot of it. There aren't even any exact numbers. AI can't even give you exact numbers. But if you start extracting how much of that land is actually leased for mineral rights, grazing rights, and in some cases, commercial development, in very, very few cases, there are, God, man, probably 100 to 150, 200 million acres currently leased, where companies have come in there, approached the federal government and said, hey, will you let us drill here? Will you let us graze here? Will you let us, in some cases, build here? And it's leased. So there's nothing, that I can see that's stopping someone from leasing this land as it is. You just can't buy it. So you're very, very much against anybody being able to buy any federal land, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's it. Because the Chinese might come by it.
Well, that's part of it, yeah.
And that you don't want Dollar Generals being put in, or you don't want it to be the Buc-ee's Grand Canyon, right?
Exactly.
You were much more spirited about this the other night.
Well, I don't know where you want me to. You want me to start, like, at the beginning, or like, are you, because it's a misnomer to call it federal land. It's not federal land; it's public land that is managed by the federal government. So
public owns it.
The public owns it. The federal government manages it.
Okay, but they also manage all the rules and everything on it.
Yeah, a lot of the rules. Yeah,
you
want to call it federal land? We can get into semantic, but we kind of need we need a common starting point, somewhere.
Well, like I said, and I don't want to get into an argument, but I just found it interesting. Like, cause I agree, man. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful land, but there's also a lot of just dog shit out there. And I know
Sure.
you spent time in southern New Mexico, and I know you're very fond of that horrible area. Because man, when I was driving out to Yuma, when I came back and saw Roger, I had to drive through southern New Mexico and parts of southern Arizona, like in Bowie area. Oh my God, it's just awful. And it's all federal land, you know. And I did some backpedaling of my own when I looked into the leasing of it. And I guess I want to ask you about the leasing piece of it. If it could be leased, for mineral rights, I'm kind of going off where I originally started, but it can be leased now. So why not just have it stay the way it is instead of selling it forever? If it could be leased for something useful, I'm sure there's a whole bureaucratic process of, well, it better be a damn good use, But I found it funny. And we're kind of poking at Josh a little bit. It's like, well, Josh is against the federal government in every case except this one.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I get it. So, we had some spirited text, flying back and forth, but so the Bureau of Land Management, and I forget how many, hundreds of millions of acres that it manages, and a lot of it's out west. A lot of it is out west, and Teddy Roosevelt was a massive proponent of this, right? So he, started the national park system. The reason why there's not a Buc-ee's, in the middle of Yellowstone is because of Teddy Roosevelt, and because Teddy Roosevelt was an avid outdoorsman. He was a hunter, but it's not just about that land is not just about hunting. And so I forget what it was in the late 1700s at the turn of the turn of the century. I think it became something else, and it eventually became the Bureau of Land Management. And so you have a lot of land out there, and depending upon where it's at, like Luke mentioned, up in the Boot Heel in New Mexico, it's scrub brush and desert, and it is. Yeah, people look at it and people are like, "Well, that's not pretty." Well, it may not be pretty to you. I thought it was gorgeous out there. Maybe that's partly because I'm from the East Coast. I'm being from North Florida, there's not a whole lot of public land on the East Coast. A lot of that land's private. I mean, you take a look at Texas. Texas is what, 98% private land? Very little public land in Texas. And so, I've always thought the West is gorgeous. But when you look at that, you're like, I don't need permission to drive out onto BLM land and camp. I don't need permission to drive out there and go shoot my guns. I don't need permission to drive out there and go fishing. I don't need permission to go drive out there and go hunting. Yeah, I got to have a hunting license, a fishing license and stuff, but I don't need permission from anybody to drive out into the middle of that and camp and, somewhat be free. It's the last land in the United States. It's the only land in the United States, unless you own it, unless you own some, right? I can go in my front yard and, I'm free, so to speak. But that's the last parts of the United States where you can go out and generally exert some level of freedom, right? And you have Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee, come along and and it was nothing more. It was a bullshit excuse, right? It was a bullshit excuse. He was like, there's a housing shortage in the United States. Okay, well, on its face, that's 100% bullshit, because there right now there's 35% more available homes than there are buyers, right? And again, Luke's drowning, and we're telling him, we're talking to him about the water, as he put it, and I'm not making light of that. It sucks. That legit sucks. We've been there, man. And so there's not a housing shortage. You think about all of the empty houses, you think about all of the rundown areas in big cities that are not being utilized to house people. And Mike Lee wanted to put this land up for sale. He wanted to, take some of this Bureau of Land Management land and put it up for sale. But yet he had no provisions. It was, he was going to sell it to quote unquote affordable housing and then use that money to pay down the national debt. Okay, on its face, all of that is absolutely ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. He wanted to sell our birthright to quote unquote pay down the national debt. you're not going to pay down the national debt. You could sell every single acre of land that BLM manages, and guess what? It's not going to make a dent in the national debt. Why? Because they're spending like drunken teenagers. They're going to spend that money in 30 minutes after they sell it, and then it's going to be gone. Then once that land is gone, it's gone. It's gone forever. Now, do I want to see the federal government maintain control of that land? Yes. And I know that is contradictory to the 10th Amendment and states' rights and everything. But if you give it to the states, then the states automatically, because most states have laws when it comes to land, they have to do an evaluation on it. And if the evaluation of the land is in the best interest of the state to sell it, then by most of the state's laws, they have to put it up for sale. So if you want to see Lake Havasu State Park go away, if you want to see a Buc-ee's or, your Dollar General or, or if you want to see Jeff Bezos, and that's fine. It's, hey man, I don't lament rich people. If you want to lose access to that land, then go ahead, give it to the states, right? And I'll use the example of Texas. You want to see Big Bend National Park go away. If you want to see Palo Duro Canyon State Park go away and be bought up by, BlackRock or the CCP or the highest bidder, pick your, person who can afford it, then by all means do that and push for that and lobby for that and get your elected officials to do that. But once that land is gone, it's gone and they're not making it anymore. That was my biggest issue with the whole thing was once that land is gone, it's it. You're not getting it back. And so, the people that, and then Mike Lee turned around and called a bunch of people who are staunch conservatives to come out and say, no, like we do not need to do this. There's, there are other options. Use the land that's available back in, metro suburban areas. You really going to put affordable housing? You're really going to put low income people up in the mountains or out in the desert and say, this is your new home? Really? You're going to put them out in areas that are already, fighting over water. Take a look at the water issues that Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, all having right now. You're going to move more people out there and, exasperate the issue? Or you're going to move them up into the mountains where it snows 50 inches a year and be like, well, I hope you and your EBT car can get off the mountain in 50 inches of snow, Pookie. Right? It was so ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Now I want to do a deeper dive on this and see how much, and you'd have to probably really do a really deep dive of the 400 million acres or how much ever it is that is public land. How much of that is actually legally accessible? Because there are parts of the Grand Canyon that you are not allowed to go. There's a lot of parts in Nevada where you are not allowed to go. Because in Nevada, their naval weapons testing range is on public land because the Department of the Navy has, I don't know if it's a lease or whatever. So Roger, I took this drive one time. I thought it was super smart. I was going from Monterey, California down to Colorado Springs, right? From basically DLI down to Colorado Springs. And I look at a map, and this is before, iPhones and really GPS. There was no GPS back then, in your car. So I'm looking at a paper map and it's like, everybody's telling me you need to go down to LA and then across, right? Through Phoenix, and then cut up to Colorado. And I'm like, well, there's this one going through Nevada. It's Highway 50. It just goes straight across. This is going to save me at least 3.5, 4 hours if I just cut across Nevada. So being the smart E4 promotable I was at the time, I took off and I'm driving across Nevada on Highway 50. And when I hit Highway 50 in the state of Nevada, there's a sign on the side of the road. I hit it at about 9:00 at night. And it says Highway 50, the loneliest highway in America. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm looking at the paper map. There's like 2 towns before I cut back south across the entire state. And on both sides of the road for hundreds and hundreds of miles, naval weapons testing range. And I'm like, oh God. So I roll into the first town about 1/8 of a tank of gas at about 1 a.m. This town doesn't even have a stoplight. the gas station is closed until 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I can't make it to the next town because the next town is 260 miles away. So I had, I had to crash in that gas station parking lot until they opened. And it wasn't at 07 in the morning. That dude didn't roll in there till 10 in the morning. So I was crashed out in that rental car. But yeah, and a lot of that, on either side of Highway 50 is public land. So it's like, I wonder, legally, I don't think anyone's allowed on a naval testing range, right? So I wonder, like, how much of that land does the federal government say you can't go on? Because I hear what Josh is saying. It's like you go into these national public lands, and man, you can just open it up on your 4-wheeler or your UTV or whatever and just drive because there's no fences, there's no nothing. And that sense of freedom is very rare these days unless you pay for it in the United States. So it's like, yeah, I don't want that to go away either. But I just wonder how much of that land is actually accessible. Probably the majority of it, I would say. Probably the majority.
That wouldn't be the land that they would sell anyway.
Yeah. Well, you could sell it to SpaceX, for them to test their weapons that they're developing.
Right.
Well, and part of the problem is
Nevada already has Tonopah, right? You have Area 51, right, which is then you have Tonopah. And again, that's not the land that is leased by the Navy to test weapons out there. They're not testing it in the Humboldt, National Forest. But again, those aren't the lands that Mike Lee was selling, but prompted to offer for sale anyway.
And to be transparent, I wasn't looking at like what lands Mike Lee is looking to sell, because I know not for a fact, an educated guess is the majority of federal lands are probably basically unusable because they're just so remote, so far from anything. And that's what I agree with you, was so stupid on its face. We're going to build affordable housing. It's like, I'm thinking the boot heel of New Mexico, and I'm like, you ain't built shit out there.
Well, and part of it is, who buys it? And it goes back to what Josh was saying, but it even goes deeper than that, because we have a big problem out here in Arizona with the Saudis, right? The Saudis are buying farms in Arizona and they're growing alfalfa because of the water, right? Because they also have a water issue. So they use all of our water. They grow the alfalfa, and it's actually cheaper for them to ship it back to Saudi Arabia so they can feed their animals. And that becomes part of the problem. So when you look at foreign investment in U.S. farms right now, they own over 40 million acres. And that's a little bit over 3% of all private farmland. And you know what? That stuff's not staying here. So it's like, on the face of it, we look at, hey, okay, we don't want a Buc-ee's built there and a travel stop or whatever. Well, the other thing I don't want them to do is to build a well that goes down 200 feet in Arizona somewhere and just siphons off as much water as they can to ship it somewhere else to grow whatever in the hell they want to grow and take that stuff back. And we already have a water problem, like Luke was talking about. So you allow these foreign, you already have laws against foreign governments, but we don't have laws against foreign companies. And that's what happens, right? Like Smithfield's one of the biggest ones, Chinese-owned companies. And they own, I think they're number 2 as far as foreign companies that have, U.S. farmland ownership, right?
They have a pig farm outside of Amarillo.
Yeah. And with Smithfield, you could argue, okay, hey, a lot of that stuff stays here, yada, yada, yada. But, again, Smithfield is just the subsidiary of the larger company, right? And you got to understand that, hey, these resources don't stay here. They're going to do what's best for them.
Let me just inject right here with Smithfield, trying to get these folks to understand. It's like, okay, it's a Chinese company, right? And Josh was saying, he gave his spiel on Chinese, students and all this stuff, right? Well, think about Smithfield, Roger, right? That employs a significant amount of people in the panhandle of Texas. Now, let's say China, decides they're going to invade Taiwan or things get tense. Well, China runs things differently than we do. Like it's gray zone conflict. What if they decide, you know what? We're just going to shut down all our Smithfield plants. Now you've got hundreds of people. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but in the panhandle of Texas, it is. Now you got hundreds of people unemployed overnight. China is willing to take that hit, whereas these families can't. It's just like, it is a big deal, even on a kind of a micro scale. So yeah, you brought up Smithfield. It just triggered me. Sorry.
Well, no, and that goes back to, the whole point, even going back to immigration. It's like we just haven't been selective on who we allow to invest, own property, buy, whatever. I mean, hey, I think we could probably make a reasonable argument that I'm not going to allow a communist, company to come in, a communist backed company come into the United States and buy land, period. But they do, and we've allowed it. And so now the only way you take it back is what, to nationalize it? Yeah, let's go down that road and start nationalizing stuff. That's the problem with a lot of this stuff is, like Josh said, you can't turn it over to the states because the states are going to ruin it. There's no common sense anywhere. Common sense dictates that, hey, look, because especially when I think of like BLM, and we have a lot of that stuff out here in Arizona, but when I think of BLM, I think of like, protecting your national, your natural wonders and that type of stuff. But we do have a lot like the Tonto Forest. The other thing that kind of pisses me off about this, and it's a little bit off topic on it, but I hate the fact that I have to pay for a permit to go use federal land. That's bullshit.
Agreed.
I shouldn't have to pay any of that.
Well, this goes back to, you remember in 2014 out in Oregon, the Bundy standoff?
Yep.
Remember all those they're cattle ranchers, and they were grazing their herd on BLM land, right? Yep. And so they didn't need anything to do anything. It was, hey man, we found some good grass and we're gonna go let our cattle graze. And then they came back and said, no, you got to pay for that. The government came back and said, no, you can't do that. You have to pay for that. And it came down to the court to having to decide whether they had to actually pay money to allow their cattle to graze on quote unquote public land. And the court sided, obviously the court sided with the Bundys and said, no, that's not, because that's federally administered land. That is not right. But it's public use. It's open for public use. And whether if you want to go camp on it, you want to go hunt on it, fish on it, whatever, right? You want to go shoot your guns on it. Okay. That's, you can do that. And that was really the reason for the whole, Bundy standoff with the FBI and everybody out there, at the overpass on the highway. That was like 2014, 2015, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But it,
well, yeah, because if I want to put my kayak in the Salt River, I have to go get a federal Tonto pass, and then I have to get an Arizona Park pass. I'm like, you guys already take all my taxes. Why in the hell am I paying for a pass for anything?
Which is all bullshit. And here's the other thing: it's again, it comes down to once that land is gone, it's gone. It doesn't matter who buys it. But we are, again, the government just they cannot get out of their own way, right? You have the Chinese companies are buying land around military bases here in the States. They're buying farmland. Did you see the Missouri Attorney General, I forget his first, I think it's Bailey, last name is Bailey, came out, Missouri, I think the Missouri Supreme Court ruled that the Chinese cannot own land in Missouri. And so they owe Missouri like millions in the ruling.
Good.
And the Attorney General said, China, you pay up or we're going to go ahead, we're going to start confiscating land. And so Mike Lee, when he first came out on, X, it was like, hey, this is the bill. At first it came to light. One, he added it in there, late one night, which disingenuous to start with. And two, it came out and was like, he called, there's a couple of guys who, really kind of led the charge on this. One of them's Braxton McCoy. The guy's a veteran, got blown up in Ramadi, wrote a book, but he's from, out west. I think he's from Idaho. And he lives out there and he's got a ranch and, he's a big proponent of it. And he was actually on Sean Ryan a couple of days ago because Sean Ryan picked it up. Jocko picked it up. A number of the Montana, elected officials, they picked it up. They're like, yeah, we're not doing that to Montana. We're not selling, BLM land in Montana. That's crazy. And so Mike Lee was like, he came out and he said, no, there's no way BlackRock or the CCP can own this. Like that's a provision, in the bill. Well, it finally got stripped out of the bill because the public backlash, it came from everybody. It came from Greenpeace. It came from the left. It came from the right. It came from a lot of folks. There's a lot of backlash to this. And he released his statement after it got completely stripped out of the bill. And he said, because of the strict constraints of the budget reconciliation process, I was unable to secure clear enforceable safeguards to guarantee that these lands would be sold only to American families, not to China, not to BlackRock, and not to any foreign interest. After he already said at the very beginning, no, that's not, there's safeguards in there to protect this. It's like, no, there wasn't. Because the wording of the bill automatically, when he first initially put it in, it basically went to whoever can buy it. And again, it's affordable housing. People like you and the three of us aren't going to be the ones buying that land. Because if you go back and you look at the land that was for sale specifically, it wasn't the Boot Heel in New Mexico. It was BLM land outside of Bozeman, Montana. It was BLM land outside of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It was BLM land, it was choice BLM land that, was going to go for millions of dollars to developers, or whoever had the money. We weren't going to be able to buy that crap. And people who needed affordable housing, again, it was absurd on its face from the very beginning. And that's why, again, I hate giving the federal government, a whole lot of power. But this is one thing they should never, ever give to the states, because the states will F it up 100%.
So I know we've got like 10, 15 minutes left. Josh, Luke, you guys want to cover the rest of the big, beautiful bill since that was taken out? What do we think?
I'll kick it to Josh, because honestly, all I know about it is there's no such thing as fiscal conservatism anymore. There's no such thing.
Nope.
So because I've been a horrible citizen and I haven't looked into it. And I do know it spends way too much money, and Doge ain't gonna make up for the amount of money that this thing spends. So I'll kick it to Josh. I'm sure that Josh has dug into it more than me.
Yeah, Luke's spot on. It's going to add 3.3 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. I'm not a fan of it at all. It doesn't, to me, the things that it could have done, it's not doing. It's only addressing a fraction of what Doge found and what Doge recommended. And they pulled out. So there was a part in there that would remove suppressors and SBRs from the National Firearms Act, right? They got rid of that. They allowed the parliamentarian in the Senate to pull that out. And so now what is effectively going to happen, if the bill goes through, the $200 tax on NFA items will drop to zero. So you won't have to pay. You still got to do a Form 4 if you want a suppressor, an SBR, or any other type of NFA item, but you don't have to pay the $200, which, okay. My question is this, and I'm not a lawyer, and this is a legit question. When the Supreme Court upheld the $200 tax because they said the ruling was, yes, that's constitutional because, again, Congress has the power to tax. If you get rid of the tax, is the NFA constitutional? And again, it's a question for another episode or whatever. But if it was in there and it's constitutional because of the tax, if you remove the tax, all right, well, does regulating suppressors and SBRs and stuff on the NFA, does that make it unconstitutional? That's a question I have. Wait, you hear some legal experts, but they pulled that out of there. They neutered that bill, from what it could have been to what it's going to be. Now I hope it doesn't pass, honestly, because it's not going to do anybody a whole lot of good, really. I don't think.
Well, it had some good components to it, and what the bill reminds me of, like all in all, I think it's bad mainly because of the national debt. It raises the debt ceiling, and then it doesn't curb spending at all. But what this bill reminds me of is like, hey, there are about 5 or 6 highlights that the majority of people will like and benefit from, and so they'll pass the rest of the shitty bill because they won't recognize what's in it. Right, mainly the spending. You get some Medicaid restrictions. There's a lot more enforcement on that. Hey, if you don't have any disability and you don't have dependents, there's certain, they want to implement a certain amount of work hours that you have to have, like 20 hours a week or something like that. That's good. Increasing the state and local tax deduction. You remember the whole SALT Act. I think that's good. The Trump tax cuts go permanent. Restrictions on food stamps. Limits the overtime and tips deduction. So no tax on tips up to a certain amount. And then I think if you make over like $150,000 or whatever, then you're obviously taxed on it. Changes the standard deduction, asylum fee. What's interesting is an AI moratorium, a revised proposal on a 10-year moratorium on state regulations on artificial intelligence made it into the bill. The updated provision provides federal aid to states as long as they do not regulate AI. That's pretty interesting, especially in a bill like this.
That's wild.
But I'm going to kick it to Luke on the AI things. I know he's probably pretty interested in it, but
I want to get this on the record.
Yeah, I know. When I look at this stuff, I'm like, hey, there are a lot of individual things on here that are like, hey, you probably, will probably pertain to 75, 80% of the population. But what that is it's smoke and mirrors. It makes me feel good, except for the $5 trillion on the backside that are going to be spent, the raising of the debt ceiling, that type of stuff. So it's like, hey, man, we'll just hit $40 trillion in debt, but I don't have to tax, I don't pay tax on my tips up to $150,000. Right. And Josh's type, feel good versus do good. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's the, Luke always talks about the 80-20 issues and this and that. Well, hey, man, you appeal to 80% of the people here that, will benefit off a couple things, a couple $100, a couple $1,000. Just disregard the $4 or $5 trillion we're going to add on the backside of this. But those are the major pieces to that. And I'll kick it to Luke for his AI moratorium, because that I thought that was pretty interesting that was thrown in there, that they don't want states to interfere with AI. So I don't know if they feel that the states are going to impede the progress of AI or what their objective is with that.
Yeah, the AI moratorium. I don't know. I didn't know about that until you just said it. Like I said earlier, I hadn't done much research on it. I do know that there's a big push for energy right now. So one of the reasons I kicked Roger that Sean Ryan episode, I can't remember the guy's name either. He's a CEO of some uranium refinement company, enrichment company. But yeah, the moratorium, I don't know. I don't know if that's for research or just, hey, we're going to build this, hyperscaling data center here. They don't want the states to get in the way of that. I don't know. I don't know what that is. But I do. We could do a whole podcast on data centers, hyperscalers, nuclear power, all that stuff, because right now I'm pretty bullish. I'm pretty forward on the nuclear power thing right now because of the executive orders being signed, a hyperscaling data center they announced they want to build outside of Amarillo, Texas. It'll be the biggest one in the world. It's just AI is the thing. And AI takes a ton of power. With these data centers, it takes power to run them, but it takes even more power to keep them cool. So you have to kind of build a behind the meter, grid type system. Behind the meter seems like it's like this. It's like if this hyperscaling data center came to Amarillo, Texas, and said, we're going to need this amount of power, the city in the area is going to say, we literally cannot do this. So all these hyperscalers, they have to have their own power. Did you guys know they're going to reopen one of the reactors on 3 Mile Island? Microsoft just bought it. They're going to activate it. And they're going to start running it. New York City is going to turn on a nuclear reactor, or New York State is going to turn on a nuclear reactor. A lot of this stuff is for these data centers because they need cheap power. They need it quick. And the thing with nuclear power is it's green. It's very green. If you look at it, we're all scared of 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, but those are aberrations in the world of nuclear power. Either way, I want to talk about AI for a second, and I want y'all to hear it here first. Y'all remember that whole thing that happened a few years ago called COVID, right? And now this is going to get pulled from YouTube, and all of Roger's, presentations are going to get pulled, whatever. I think we can all agree now, as we said early on, that escaped a lab in China. I think we can all agree on that. I don't think that's controversial to say anymore. Whether it was on purpose or accident, I definitely think it was accident, but it definitely came from that lab in Wuhan. So we all know that happened because the Chinese were moving fast, reckless, minimal safety regards, measures, all that stuff. What I've been seeing with AI lately is there's some scary stuff out there. Like there's some stuff going on that NASA is not comfortable with when they're running tests with this quantum AI, where there's like, we're going to have to pull the plug because this is doing stuff that it was expressly forbidden to do, and it's doing it anyway. Here's what's going to happen, and I'm getting it on the record. And Josh is going to call me crazy, but I'm telling you, the next lab leak is going to be some AI that comes out of China, and it's going to infect the world. And it's not going to be like Terminator 2. It's not going to be like that, but it is going to cause some major havoc. And it's probably going to happen within the next 5 years. It's going to shut everything down. It's not everything. It's going to shut a lot of stuff down. It's going to cause a lot of havoc. I'm not going to close out. I'm kicking it back to Roger. But because I want to get his thoughts. I really think that the next big thing is going to be, it's going to leak out of China. Because I think that the United States, we play fast and loose, irresponsible sometimes. But I do think we've got a reasonable aspect of the way we do business, specifically with safety and security. Chinese don't have that. And I think the next lab leak is going to be cyber in nature. So, Roger, what do you think about that? And you can close us out. Shout out to everybody for being patient and waiting for us to record a new episode finally.
No, I think you're right. And we've already seen some remnants of this. I shouldn't say remnants. We've already seen, this happen early on. You guys remember when the Israelis conducted that cyber attack on the Iranian centrifuges? And what didn't come out of that was that leaked, right? It went beyond just the Iranian centrifuges. And just like anything else, and we've all heard of worms and Trojans and viruses and this and that. And, it's very, very hard to contain any of that stuff. So even if you have a target, and this is something that you don't really hear a whole lot about, even if you have a target, you want to target Luke's computer or whatever. Well, Luke's computer is going to touch 1,000 other devices. And so it's very, very hard to contain that stuff to just Luke. So we've already seen some of this happen with the Israeli attack. You don't see it in the news, but that definitely did spread out throughout Europe. And there were some cases where it had made its way back to the United States. So it would not surprise me that something like that either leaks or they target something, right? It gets out. And then from there, man, you can't put it back in the bag. I mean, you look at Salt Typhoon, right? In the US telecom network, where the FBI has come out and said, hey man, it's compromised and we will probably never be able to fix it. That's how bad that is, right? And that was started because law enforcement built a backdoor in there for law enforcement use. But with anything, go figure, right? Violating your rights one at a time. But, with any of that stuff, as we know, it's like, hey, man, once it makes its way out, there's no pulling that thing back. So it doesn't, it would not surprise me something like that happens in the next 5 years. And what I'm looking at, what would worry me is because by the time we catch it, it'd be so far down the road, right? I mean, we're talking about instantaneous, but you start looking at critical infrastructure where power grids could go down, right? Pumps could go down, that type of stuff, where, one city gets infected, that could spread throughout an entire country in a matter of seconds. It can be global, within an hour. And especially with a lot of these older SCADA systems and this and that. I mean, everything's connected nowadays. And again, like Luke said, we could do an entire episode on this stuff. I mean, now you're finding that even like air gap systems aren't even protected anymore. Going all the way back to connectivity through the power lines. Dude, it's craziness. So, I don't think that's, I guess the only thing I'd be curious on is, might not even be China. I mean, it could definitely be something like the Israelis, right? Or something else in the Middle East. I mean, depending on whatever conflict is up there, they're going to conduct cyber attacks, cyber warfare, whatever that is, whatever that's going to look like. And you're just not going to be able to contain that to one area. So with that, I know we covered a lot and a lot's been going on, man. It's nuts. We sit here and we're texting each other back and forth. It's like, dude, we talked about Trump when he came into office, not being able to keep up with him, and just with the world news right now, everything going on, SCOTUS rulings and the Iranian thing and the big, beautiful bill. It's nuts. But I think the bill is probably going to have the focus here, at least over the next couple of days. But definitely want to appreciate everybody out there for hanging with us, watching us, listening to us. Keep your canteen cups secure and full of some good booze.